Hey guys, and welcome to my cave. Today I want to show you this, which is, I believe, the best beginner leather crafting kit out there, at least in my opinion. I really actually do wish that I had this when I started my own journey, because it would have saved me a lot of time, money, and given me a really good set of quality tools to work with straight from the start. Before showing you what's in the box, I have to say that I bought it with my own money. They don't know I'm doing this. It's not affiliated, not sponsored, nothing. It's just a really cool thing that I wanted to show you. This is the Welcome to Leathercraft hand sewing kit, which I chose in 3.5mm, made by OKA Factory in Japan. I really do love that on the package you see instantly what's in the box and how to use the different items with some very cool little diagrams. Now, once you open the kit, you are met with a ton of instructions about how to use these tools. Now, admittedly in Japanese, but I'm sure with the images provided, you can understand how these work. You also get a couple of stickers, which I always find fun. Within the documentation, you'll find a paper template that I'll be using today to make a card holder. And yes, you can use this as well and follow along the build process. Now, it does come with a few variations, but for the sake of this video and keeping it relatively short, I'm going to just use a very simple pattern here. The first tool here is an edge beveler used to round out your edges. The sizing provided is actually very versatile and can be used on a ton of different projects. Then comes the LeFrenchCrafter, which is a tool that allows you to take off material from the back side of your leather, basically thinning out that leather. So if you have multiple stacks of leather, this is when you need them to be relatively thin. I do want to note that all of these tools came exceptionally sharp and I did not have to sharpen them before using them. The next tool is a combination adjustable edge creaser and stitching groover. This is a great versatile tool that comes with a few interchangeable bits and yeah, can be used in lots of different ways, but I'll show you a few later on. Finally, for the last part of the tools section, you have the stitching chisels or stitching punches or pricks, depending how you want to call them. These are made to punch through the leather, make those holes that you need to be able to then sew. I chose mine in 3.5mm, not because I needed it, because I've got loads already, but because I feel that that's the most versatile option for people who are starting off in the craft. It's just close enough spaced that it looks okay without being too long to stitch. In here you get a set of 3 chisels with 2, 4 and 6 tooth options, which is really all you need. Quick thoughts here, out of the box all of these tools look really sturdy and well built. They're not going to win any design prizes or beauty prizes, but they do look well made, and this is something that we're going to be putting to the test. In the box you'll also find some very fine sandpaper and a metal rod, which are here to help you keep your edge bevelet nice and sharp. There are 2 sets of nylon thread in 0.7mm thickness, which is possibly a bit thicker than I would personally use, but also a very versatile choice for beginners. We get the bits for the adjustable groover, as well as a teeny tiny piece of jeweler's green paste, which again, I'll show you how to use that later. You get a pack of 4 round-tipped stitching needles at a nice, comfortable size. You get quite a big amount of tokonol, which is a burnishing agent that you can use to help smooth out your edges once your project is nearing completion. Now, this pot is actually much bigger than you might think because you need a tiny bit of tokonol at a time, so theoretically with this you can last at least 6 months, maybe much longer depending on how often you use it. And finally, hiding at the bottom of the box, you get a good sized cutting board, which is really nice. So to demonstrate this kit, let's make the aforementioned card holder. I'm using vegetable tanned leather from Rademaker, which is a tannery in Belgium that makes some really nice leather. So if you're in Europe looking for a great tannery, go and check out rademaker.com. Now, you will need a few extra items that aren't included in the box, but don't worry, you can probably find these lying around your house already. Starting off, you'll want a sharp knife, could be a box cutter, could even be a pair of scissors. You'll want some leather glue or some neoprene cement glue. You'll want something to hit with, like a mallet or even a random piece of wood. Just make sure you don't use a metal hammer, because you never want to be hitting metal with metal, and you will be hitting your metal chisels to be able to punch those holes. So anything but metal. You'll also want a few extra small items. I would suggest having a 100% piece of cotton cloth, could be an old t-shirt. You'll want a pen, you'll want maybe a lighter to burn out those threads, and yeah, maybe even a ruler if you want, a metal ruler, up to you. Once the template is cut out, I like to trace it out on the back of my leather using the pen. I can then carefully take my very sharp knife or box cutter or even pair of scissors and cut out my different pieces. Now that I have my 2 pockets as well as the main body, I can test out the LeFrenchCrafter. And now, honestly, I'm really astounded at just how sharp this thing right out of the box. It has to be very sharp, and it works flawlessly for this task. Using a French skiver isn't hard, but you really do want to practice first on a scrap piece of paper to make sure you get the angle of the cut just right, just to make sure you don't mess up your piece. Here we can have a look at the leather once it's been thinned out, and yeah, while it's not really needed for something with only 2 layers, I did want to show you the before and after here, and it does help somewhat with the overall end thickness of the product. So especially if you're making the 3-pocketed version or whatever, then you really do want to start skiving your pieces. Now we can bevel the top edge of the card pockets to give them a nice rounded out edge. And here too, I am really impressed at just how sharp the tool is out of the box. Quick tip for you guys, I always like to bevel the back side, the flesh side, the fuzzy side of the leather first, because it's the softest side and it's the hardest one to bevel. And if you start by doing the back first, you stuff a lot more material on the bottom part, which helps get your cut in. Whereas if you do it last, you've got less leather you can lean that cut onto, which, yeah, it makes it harder. So start with the fuzzy side first, the flesh side, the back side of the leather. So despite looking quite plain, this edge beveler actually works a charm. I can apply a teeny tiny piece of cotonal along the top edge and go ahead and burnish with my 100% cotton rag. Burnishing the edge helps the fibers, bond in and lock into place, and it gives you a much shinier surface, much smoother surface, and also protects the edge against wear and tear over time. With the top edge of the pockets all burnished out and rounded out and all that and looking good, we can go ahead and glue it together. I'm using some white Leathercraft glue, but if you're using neoprene cement glue, which is, I think, much better, do make sure that you apply the glue to both surfaces, let it dry fully to the touch, and then press your pieces together, and it should be fine, shouldn't move. But if you're using the more traditional white water-based glue, make sure you leave it to dry overnight. Now the 3 pieces of leather I originally had are actually starting to look like a card holder. So I want to add a bit of flair along the edges, and I'll grab the edge creaser here and use the special little spade attachment and run it along my edges, giving me that nice neat little line. It doesn't add anything, it just looks a bit neater, looks a bit more built up and well thought out, so it just looks better, in my opinion, of course. I now want to address the uneven edges, as making sure they're nice and straight has a direct effect on the straightness of your final stitch. I know this is a bit weird at this point, but trust me on this, make sure those edges are really nice and straight, cut them flush, and then go ahead and sand them down. I use a 120 grit piece of sandpaper, which is nice and rough, but not too much, and I go ahead and work those to perfection, making sure that all my edges are nice and flush. I'm now going to mark my stitch line, which I like to have at roughly 3 mm away from the edge. One trick is to take the 2-pronged stitching chisel and just run those 2 edges along there, giving you a nice straight line as well. That's another option. So let's punch the first hole, make sure it all goes through. Good, and off we go. The stitching holes are made, and I have to say that these chisels worked really well. Stitching chisels are maybe one of the very first more specialized items that people buy when they get into the craft, and buying cheap tools can really come with a cost long term. First of all, in terms of look of your final stitch, because sometimes those holes are quite ugly, but also in terms of longevity of your tool. I've seen many people complain about, cheap tools breaking quite fast, or if they fall, those teeth break off. So I'm glad to say that these ones have worked flawlessly for me, and I feel pretty certain I can recommend them to a newcomer. For the stitching, I'll be using a saddle stitch, which is a very old technique within the world of leathercrafting. Obviously, I'll be using the included threads and needles. If it's your first time stitching, I would really recommend you go ahead and learn about it, and I am not the best person to teach you that. The best person I think that everyone here will agree on is Nigel Armitage. Nigel Armitage has a couple of really in-depth, really well-made, very simple, very straight to the point videos all about stitching. Specifically all about saddle stitching. I will link his videos down there in the description below, and I definitely recommend you go and check it out. Et voila, the wallet is all stitched up. And yeah, not too shabby. Now we can give all the outer edges a good burnish using a Tocquenol once more and a cotton rag. You really don't need much of this stuff, and it really does help give those edges that perfect final look that you're expecting from a quality leather good. Now the final step for me is to protect my leather, and for that I always go to Saphir Crème Surfine, which is really amazing at nourishing that leather and yeah, putting in a nice waxy finish which looks glossy and just gorgeous and hits the light just right. I love it. All you do is apply the Crème Surfine onto your piece, let your piece sit and dry, and then come off and buff off the extra. So while my piece is drying, I am going to show you what we can do with the other things included in the box. First, we are going to make a strop, which is great at keeping your tools, which are already sharp, sharp. You'll want a scrap of leather, which you just cut any shape or size. Traditionally, they're nice and long and nice and straight and not too wide. And you apply that green jeweler's rouge. It's called rouge red in French, but it's just green paste. And it's a slightly abrasive paste. And the idea is that you'll saturate the fibers of the leather with this paste and then run your tools against it, making sure that your tools are basically being buffed every single time, so polished every time, and it's taking off a teeny tiny bit of material every time, keeping those edges really razor sharp. As you can see, this tiny piece of green compound will actually go a really long way. So first, let's give the already sharp French skiver at least 15 to 20 passes on this and just make sure it's polished up nicely. And yes, I can confirm it is still as sharp as it was out of the box. While we're at it, let's grab our knife or box cutter, because even box cutter blades can be sharpened, and give this a few passes along the strop, making sure that this as well is gorgeously sharp. And yeah, you can see how easily it goes through the leather. Now I want to show you how to use the included metal rod to sharpen your edge beveler. Since my edge beveler is already nice and sharp, I'm going to be taking the smoothest grit sandpaper, the highest grit, the one which takes off less material, and just place it against that metal rod, on top of the metal rod, and I can now run my edge beveler along that, making sure that the groove inside the edge beveler is nicely sharpened every single time. And here I am beveling while holding the tool just the tip of my two fingers and using the tiniest amount of pressure to push the tool along, and it just goes and goes and goes, and it's so sharp, and yeah, I have nothing more to say than just it works, and that's what you expect from a great tool. The leather has had time to dry. We can now buff the piece down. And just look at that shine. This leather from Rademacher with the Crème Surfine really comes out gorgeously in the end. I absolutely love it every single time. So we've looked at the tools, we've built a card holder. Now let's talk about the price. At the time of purchase, this box cost me about 73 euros, and add on a bit of shipping, that was just around 100 euros for the whole thing. Now I also have to add on about 25 euros of taxes, which comes to about 125 euros, and definitely is also changing depending on where you are. Given the quality of the tools, for this price, it is an absolute bargain, a steal, and I cannot recommend it more. And depending where you are in the world, and how tariffs are being placed upon different goods coming from other countries, buying from Japan might be really interesting. I'm in France, so getting it to France is a long way. Shipping was pretty expensive. If you're in the US, if you're in Asia, those shipping costs may come right down, in which case this is an even better deal for you guys. So in conclusion, for roughly 100 euros, $100, maybe a bit more, you are getting a great set of tools that is probably going to last you 10, 20 years for some of these tools if you take care of them, if they don't fall, basically. That's all that could happen. You're getting a full kit that will help you do anything you need to get started in leathercraft. And as I mentioned in this video, I don't really see anything else you need apart from some few basic things that you can find lying around your house. I don't think there's much you need at all to complement this kit before you can get starting. And as I mentioned at the very start of this video, if I had had this kit when I started my leathercrafting journey, I would have saved a lot of time and money. So, thanks a ton for joining me today, guys, for this video. I really do hope you've enjoyed, I hope you've learned something, and I hope to see you very soon for some more crafting.